Now I've hit the record button. We gave you all the secrets to Devve before I hit the record button. I'm sorry that's not going to make it on the video. Just kidding. So what I was saying was, so Davin and I are doing the roundups every week, like clockwork. It's going to happen. It didn't happen last week. It's not going to happen this week, and it's not going to happen next week. And what that has to do with are two things: Davin being out for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to be out because I'm going on a fishing trip with my dad, and he's getting up there in age, and that's very important. So I'm actually not going to be here next until Thursday for that very reason. But anyhow, so let's break this down. We have, so every Tuesday morning we have what we call an all hands call, where, daily there's whips, work in progress calls, but on Tuesday we have the all hands. And those are the ones that I really try and get into, because those are the ones where the whole team comes together and we say, okay, what are we working on? What's most important? What's laying out in front of us here? Everything that we've told you up until this point continues to happen in the background. It's happening in ways that I could not even articulate to you. So beautiful. What we're working on this morning and what we want to work on really what I've been focused on a lot is taking this message, which is too big. It's too big, and distilling it down into little bite-sized chunks that are easy enough to digest, right? So when somebody comes to learn about Devve, I'll bet nobody in here is, maybe you're mildly interested in how the sharding architecture works, but to give you the understanding of why this works, I don't think you need to understand how the cross shard mechanism works in depth, right? We want to provide that to you, but I don't think most people in here are going to, say, okay, I want to learn about this project in 10 minutes and need to get that into that minutia of what we're doing. Even though that is very, very important. And so what we're trying to do, what I did with the intro to Devve video, the reason I'm translating that, which by the way, that's in 10 different languages now, if anyone would like to share it. Thank you, Roger, who gave me the website to be able to do that. Changed my life, Roger. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, that's going to be it's a huge tool. I mean, imagine the impact that we're going to have worldwide.
Yes. But we want to distill the messaging down, and we want to put it in a more coherent way. At least that's what I'm focused on. Revamping the website, bringing more of a brand forward as opposed to, where we've been thus far. As far as the, did everyone see the tweet with the little card from Ray being at a UN conference right now, a United Nations conference? Okay. Did everyone see that? So,
yep.
Ray likes to drop stuff. He just does it on LinkedIn. And what, if Ray does it, great. We're going to talk about it.
So Ray's guys, and I had a call with Ray last week, and then he literally told me, listen, I'm not a Telegram guy. If you guys want to talk to me or you want to see what I'm doing, go to LinkedIn.
Yeah, he is definitely a LinkedIn guy, 100%. And I've been encouraging people to follow him on LinkedIn, so I hope you guys do that. But so he loves to drop hints. He probably doesn't mean to drop hints. He's just doing so much cool stuff that, he posts about it there. And I know that we're hinting towards stuff. Anyhow, hopefully we're going to be getting some updates from Ray on what's going on in that United Nations conference.
So can I ask you a question? And why is he exactly doing there? I mean, do you know what he's going to be talking about? I mean, we know that has to do with climate change, but I don't know if you have any insights on it.
I can give you insights in a roundabout way. And I want to preface this by saying I'm just going to give you insights based upon my knowledge up until this point. Ray's going to have to give you specifics. When it comes to the UN, environmental, climate, we'll say ESG, even though it's kind of the wrong term. That is a very, very big point to the United Nations. There is a ton of funding that can be unlocked for nations who find a way to quantify and, kind of by default monetize their environmental efforts. And here's the reason this is important, and kind of something that I want people to kind of grip. When you think about a country, I want you to think about a country kind of like you would think about a business, right? A business has assets, whether those are intellectual property assets, whether they're hard assets, whether they're a product they're selling, whatever, they've got assets. When it comes to a country, their assets are the land, their assets are the people, their assets are their exports, what they can export, when it comes to climate change, whether you've got rising sea levels, increased salinity that is killing the biodiversity, let's say there's less species of fish as a result of rising salinity, whether there's deforestation in the interior, these are all assets of if you consider it to be like an enterprise business of a country. So naturally, what a country is going to do from a risk mitigation standpoint is they're naturally going to try and preserve their assets in whatever form that be, right? In the process of doing something they're going to do naturally, based on the way that the carbon markets work, based on the way that if you know about the Paris Agreement back in 2015, the carbon caps that were put on all countries, they actually have the ability to monetize these actions that they're taking, right? So if a forest is under imminent threat of being cut down due to, let's say, cattle, right? The beef industry is a big one. Or palm oil, that's another one. There's a huge deforestation that goes on due to, palm. If you save that forest, what you can actually do is you can read through sensors, you can quantify the environmental impact of that, and you can create these carbon credits that we've been talking about. And that is actually a way of monetizing the things that you're going to do already, the things that you need to do to protect the interior of your enterprise, let's say, your country. There are many issues with the process thus far that we've spoken about, right? There's issues with the way in which carbon credits are created. They're done, in not an immutable fashion. They're done by humans, by these big three certification organizations. There are some countries, I won't mention names, but there are some countries that, they've been producing these carbon credits that just don't have the desired environmental impact underneath them.
And they sell it more than once too.
And that's the next thing I was going to say is some carbon credits are being sold more than once on the market. And so you've got to repeat, right? And when you've got these carbon caps, if you're a company, let's say you're Apple, right? And Apple they're committed to going carbon neutral by 2030. That's their new slogan. They've got 6 years to go carbon neutral. Now, when it comes to traditional ways of making environmental impact, like preventing deforestation or planting trees, according to my understanding, that can only account for about 20% of the carbon neutrality that needs to happen, right, for these companies to actually make it there. The other 80 needs to come from technological solutions, right? We've talked about TS Nano in the past. That would be considered a technological solution. But there are some very big deficiencies that fall into this market. Now it operates at about a $900 billion level, the carbon credit market, the impact asset market right now. But to produce these carbon credits is, from my understanding, an incredibly cumbersome process, right? There are many, many checkpoints that you have to go through to get these carbon credits certified. Then once they're certified, the initial certification, you're kind of in a trust me, bro process. You're kind of in like, okay, I am relying that up until this point, the actual environmental impact that I'm paying for as a company is going to be met by this carbon credit. This is really where blockchain could play a huge role. And I want to be clear that we're not the only chain that's trying to enter this space. There's a lot of chains that are trying to enter this space. Now, I'm going to tie this back to the UN here in a second. A couple of these countries that we're working with, one huge problem that happens, and especially in some of your, I would say, less rich companies or countries, is that the indigenous people, the ones who are actually making this impact, have been largely taken advantage of by the middlemen. And what I mean by that is this, right? Somebody might go into a country and say, hey, you're having this large environmental impact. We're able to quantify this, but we need to put things in place to be able to quantify that and get you these carbon credits printed, which would be an income stream for you guys. But it's going to cost a couple $1 million to set this up. And so what they do is they go into these places and essentially these middlemen paying the upfront cost take like 80%, right? If a carbon credit sells for $20, they're taking $16 of that $20, right? So and what it's doing is it's negatively impacting the indigenous people. This is an area where Devve can shine. The way that we can have real-time environmental data tracking, the way that we can have complete provenance, from why it was created, when it was created, how it was created, all the way through to the sale Dev Exchange, right? From start to finish, we can be in this process. Now we're working with nation states. You guys know that there's a few that we're working with, and some of these nations, obviously they're part of the United Nations, but the United Nations has a very, very keen focus on what we're doing here environmentally. And to my understanding, I don't want to promise anything, to my understanding, when these, come to a form of fruition, and one of them is like really big, that's something the United Nations unlocks funding for. It's like, okay, you've achieved this level. Now we can unlock funding for more of this.
Let me ask you this, Austin. I mean, what you just mentioned about the data that is going to be acquiring and registering in the blockchain. I'm thinking, that this will also help the countries, like if they're trying to get some financial aid for environmental purpose. It would be better for them to show up with data than just showing up with empty hands saying, oh, we want to do this, but we don't have a clue how to do it. But here's the data. We need help to protect a certain species, for example, in the forest, or, to get funding for preventing fires and stuff like that. So showing that data is going to put them in a better position to acquire funding.
Real-time environmental data is an area that I want to be honest with you guys, I don't quite understand the whole implication of what this is going to look like. But from my understanding, that real-time environmental data, which by and large, we can do better than anyone else, is a massive, massive whale. And so I don't want to go any further than what you see on social media, right? Just to say that Ray's at this. It's not the first time he's been at something like this. This is not the first time he's posted a UN badge. I'll just put it that way. So, and this is one area of what we do, but I just want to say this now. We are unequivocally one of the biggest projects in crypto that nobody's ever heard of. And that's going to change really soon. So the ESG side of things is remarkable. And I would encourage anyone that's like interested to go on YouTube and like start, just search videos, because there's a ton of criticisms of this space. Things like greenwashing, right? Greenwashing is, a lot of what a lot of these companies want to do is they want to promote a positive environmental impact, while at the same time, what they're really concerned with is their bottom line. I mean, let's face it. If a company doesn't have a good bottom line, they're not going to be a company for very long. And what has happened with a lot of these companies is they are taking the benefits of positive environmental impact without giving the actual positive environmental impact. And that would be a process called greenwashing, right? Like, so for instance, if they're certifying carbon credits for forests that were saved, but then you come to find out later, these forests were not actually in danger of being cut down. They're just forests somewhere, right? But they're creating, these impact assets as a result. That would be a form of greenwashing.
So is this the nicest way to say scam?
Yeah. Here's the thing, right? When we're talking about an industry that is purported to do good, I don't think anyone would argue the fact that at least at some level, this is supposed to do good. It's supposed to do good on an environmental level. It's supposed to do good on a societal level for, the people within the countries. It's just supposed to do good for the most part. But when big money becomes wrapped up in this, right, there has to be an alignment of values. Somehow, some way, you've got to make it more profitable to do good than to not do good. And that's really where we're laser focused. That's where a lot of this work that we're doing, and soon the lid's going to blow off and you guys are all going to understand. There will be case studies. Hopefully I'll be in these countries sitting down with the prime minister, yucking it up. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. I hope I can though, because
another question. What's the timeline for this carbon credits to get I know we have to wait for the exchange first.
I don't have an answer to that. Timelines are like not. They're a very difficult thing to answer. But I want to touch on another thing. I guess we're going to spend some time on this topic. So I want to talk about TS Nano for a second. So TS Nano is written about in the white paper. I've spoken about it quite a bit. They're a nanopolymer sealant that when mixed with concrete, the application that they're using it for right now, which is very effective, is to seal up old oil and gas wells. Now, old oil and gas wells, they emit methane into the atmosphere. And if you ask Duncan, he'll tell you methane is a huge, huge problem. But as a result of this, because of this sealant, what they do is they mix it with concrete. And as a result, it prevents this methane from seeping out. Now, if you think to yourself, okay, I've got a sealant that I can mix with concrete that seals it at a nanoparticle level. Like it seals it so well that methane can't seep through. What else could you do with this? Like, what are the other applications? What are lateral businesses that might come about as a result of this? And I'm not going to answer that question for you, but I just want to tell you, as we get into the weeds with these countries, and this is from Ray's lips, they start telling us the problems that they're having, and we go, well, why are you having these problems? We have solutions to these problems out the gate. Really, the biggest problem that we're having is there's a lot of work. there's a lot of opportunity here. And so I, just read his LinkedIn. I know the UK group. God, I love you guys. You guys like to really go down the Illuminati rabbit hole. Don't worry. It's all going to be clarified at some point soon. When it starts dropping. So Roger, we have some questions in the chat, and I assume those questions will lead us into more things that we want to talk about. So would you mind?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the first one here. Yes, we have Gavio asking, what does lock forever means on treasury economics? I don't know if you know exactly what he's referring to.
So hold on, let me scroll up because I want to read it. Let's see. Where are we? Gavi. Okay. He wants to understand the treasury vesting and lockup. Okay, so I'll explain to you kind of my understanding on the way that the treasury works. And right now, I guess what we're talking about here is the other 150 million Devve, right, that are there. So the purpose of those is, so a couple things. One, we have to talk about the Evergreen Fund. So the Evergreen Fund is a fund that is seeded with sales of Devve. Now, don't let that scare you, because anything that's sold out gets locked up immediately. And what the Evergreen Fund does is it invests into impact asset generating companies such as TS Nano, right? So we've got equity in TS Nano. We get money from the equity. We also get money from the impact assets. They live on the DevX chain. We now have ultra premium impact assets. So that's another side to this. But as far as the treasury investing is concerned, like the 150 million that are held back for the foreseeable future, those are locked up, right? Whether they're locked up in the treasury or they're locked up, through an OTC deal that we might have done with an institution who wants to have access to the ultra premium impact assets. Either way, they're going to be locked up. And as soon as they leave the treasury, my understanding is they're going to be staked for 2 to 10 years. That's a minimum, right? So those aren't going to enter circulating supply. When I personally, and Grant, I was a community member before I joined the team, right? And, Roger will tell you, I went all in hard. When I look at the circulating supply, and if you look at the emissions curve, come November, we're going to be right around that 100 million mark. And then it's going to take many, many, many years for that to increase. Once the once the vesting is over, which I believe is November 7th, the curve basically goes like that, right? It basically goes flat. Exactly. It turns flat. And this isn't, we're not.
And let's add to that, Austin, that the market is going to start. It's changing already. So,
yes. Yeah. I don't want to talk about the market, but I do want to say that, I don't know, every bull run Bitcoin's ever had kicked off right around the US election. So I don't know what to say, but I think we're probably in that range right now. But as far as like you will never see the Forever Association putting new Devve on the market, to fund what we're doing. That's not how it works. We're not funding our salaries or funding our day-to-day operations with selling Devve. That's not the way that this is ever going to work. Every single Devve in the ecosystem has a purpose, right? Whether that purpose was pre-sales up until this point, or later on, whether that purpose is we've got a large institution that wants to make an investment into impact assets, And to do that, they must stake and lock up Devve as the key that allows them to even have access to those that live on the DevX chain. Now, what we may need to do in the meantime is we say, okay, it's going to take, and I'm just spitballing here, don't quote me on this, it's going to take $1 million worth of Devve for you to stake to have access to these impact assets, right? Well, they're not going to, we've got to make that easy on them. We've got to make it simple for them to be able to do that. And so as a result, what we'll probably do is obfuscate that in some way, do an OTC, stake it for them. Boom. Now you've got the key. Now you're in, and you can avail of these impact assets that'll live on DevX. So, and again, these are things that we're talking about, down the road. And Duncan can go into this a hell of a lot better than I can. But I want to tell everyone that's watching, and this wasn't something I really understood until I started working here and really dug in. And this goes back to the messaging kind of needing to be distilled down. For anyone to touch the chain, Devve's involved for the most part, right? Whether it's the S2 business where, we want to make shards available as a service, Devve's involved. Whether it's the ESG side of things, you want to have access to these impact assets, which, by the way, the ESG side of things is going to live on top of DevX S2, which is the shards as a service, right? So it all plays a role. To have access to the impact assets, you're going to need to stake and lock up Devve. Or Dev Exchange, which is, the more I learn about it, kind of the most exciting thing we're doing. Which
actually, that's another question. I have a question about the exchange.
Whenever you're ready. We'll get into that in one sec. But I didn't, when I first heard about it, right, just having a Web3 background, I didn't really understand the impact, to use a pun, I guess, the impact of what this can actually do. I did not understand the giant issue that existed in traditional finance wanting to use blockchain, understanding the benefits of blockchain, but having not solved the issue of self-custody mixed with what, I don't want to call it high frequency trading, but mixed with the type of execution that you must have to be one of these large financial institutions. And we did solve that. And we solved it in a way that is really, really beautiful. It's so beautiful that one of the biggest financial companies in the world is you'll see. It's going to blow your mind. So, all right, go ahead, Roger. What was your question there, buddy?
Yes, I have a question here. Someone wants to know here's how, can you explain to the community how Dev Exchange is not just another crypto exchange?
Totally. I say totally like I'm that confident that I can do it. I thought so as well. I thought, well, we have DEXs, right? We have DEXs. This is not a big deal, self-custody. Up until this point, you've had to make a choice, right? If you're a trader, let's say, and you want to set limit orders, stops, you want to have one cancels the other, you want to have the experience of a centralized exchange, right? Because if you're a high frequency trader, if you're a market maker, all of these various things, you're going to have to give up custody of your funds. Point blank, bottom line. That's the way that it's been up until this point. So you had to make a choice. Do you want to have the learning curve of a decentralized exchange, right? But you keep self-custody. Or do you want to have the convenience of a Coinbase, but you've got to trust them with your money? There really has been no middle ground for this, right? And that didn't, when I first started here, that did not occur to me, the problem that was going on, right? But, and I've mentioned this before, the Australian Stock Exchange spent 7 years trying to upgrade their systems with blockchain technology, ultimately failing. They couldn't do it, right? The DTCC, they settled $462 trillion worth of securities the year before last. Also tried. Couldn't do it. They could not do it. We have been able to not only solve this issue, but solve it in a way that plays nice with all legacy systems, because we're coded in C++, and you can access the chain. All transactions are initiated through a simple REST API. That means that all of your programmers can work on this, right? So not only have we solved it through, and I'll just tell you, it's through atomic swaps on the back end, but it's so much more graceful than I'm giving it credit to be on the front end. We've solved it in a way that if the DTCC had this technology or the Australian Stock Exchange had this technology, we'd be having a different conversation about what they were able to do. We've solved it in such a way that traditional finance behemoths now have the ability to use blockchain, the immutable nature of it, the security of it, everything that comes with blockchain, without the drawbacks, right? And custody was a huge drawback. But here's another drawback. You got my 7-year-old dad, right? He's used to trading on TD Ameritrade. Do you think he's going to be okay learning how to use a ledger or learning how to use MetaMask or anything of that nature? Or do we need to give him an experience exactly like he's used to, where hacks are not a thing? That doesn't happen. Nobody goes and hacks your stocks, right? That does not happen. If he dies, we know where his funds go, right? Because there's an advanced directive, because that's how traditional finance works. If he loses his login, well, he can prove who he is, so he can get back into that, right? In crypto, you lose your private keys, you're screwed. Because of our patented fraud, theft, and loss protection, because of the privacy on chain that we have, which privacy is very important for financial reasons, but it must be privacy with auditability. This is extremely important to real world businesses. Because of those things, it's not just the technology, but it's the combination of the patents that we hold as well that make this a secret sauce, a big secret sauce, right? We can provide the rest of the world who has no interest in adapting to Web3. They couldn't give a shit. They just want a good experience, right? They want to be able to make money in security and sleep at night without needing to make sure their ledger and their 24 secret words are safe. That's what we bring. We bring the non-negotiables of real world business to the real world. We're not playing in the crypto sphere. We are, but we're not.
What do you have to say about the request from BlackRock to Coinbase? I think I did share with you.
Yeah, I don't think that's actually a very big deal. So I've been following that. And essentially the way that it worked is, so they had to settle their trades on chain within 24 hours, right? That was originally the rule. And somebody was like, hey, BlackRock is just trading in paper Bitcoin, which is not true. They were not trading in paper Bitcoin, but there was a lag between order and execution, right? Because the requirement was 24 hours. And so they just trimmed it down 12 hours. That's all they did. They took note. They said, hey, you guys are like thinking we're doing something untoward here. We're not. This is a very traditional way of operating. We just settle in 24 hours. Now they're settling in 12 hours, but it is in fact on chain. It's not off chain. I think there was that was a talking point that was kind of blown out of proportion. And I think, take me for example, right? I'll let you guys into my life just a little bit here. I do not have a college degree. I have not, gone through like I tried college, but a squirrel would run by and I'm like, whoop, that's it. I can't pay attention anymore.
I'm a drop off too. I drop off from college too. So
right. I am not trained in this. And so like when I got into the crypto sphere, all of my financial training, anything I started to understand kind of came through the lens of Web3, right? I didn't understand the impact necessarily of rate increases, rate cuts, Jerome Powell, how the Federal Reserve works, like monetary policy, M2 money. So I didn't understand that stuff, right? That was outside of my wheelhouse. I kind of had to grip onto that, but I only gripped onto it in the sense of how does this affect the price of Bitcoin and thereby the price of everything else, right? The real financial world works completely different than we work here in crypto. They will never settle for what we have settled for. They will never operate in the realm that we've been willing to operate in, right? To onboard somebody, you should not have to, like I've told this story before, but like I was setting up a ledger for my dad. We wrote down his 24 words. And what does he do? He yanks out his cell phone, trying to take a picture of his 24 words. And if I had not slid my hand over that camera, he would have immediately made his 24 words no bueno. They would be gone, right? They would be absolutely insecure because you never put your key or your mnemonic phrase online. You just never do it. That's something that's specific to crypto. Normal people are not going to deal with that. That is too much. They're going to walk away and they're going to go buy Microsoft because they can sleep at night, right? We've got to adapt to the rest of the world. We cannot expect the rest of the world to adapt to us. And people have talked about adoption for years. I used to do work with another huge chain. I won't mention their name, Polygon. And they were getting these huge, massive like deals with Starbucks and Nike and all these different places, right? And so here's the bottom line. I was very impressed with it for a time. I was like, wow, these people are using Polygon. That's crazy because Polygon is constantly congested. It's not even the best experience. And I like Polygon. I'm not shitting on them at all. But then I came to find out that like on the back end, there were deals being made, like because there was a lot of infrastructure to set up and there was retooling and there was training and there was a new team that needed to come on and manage this stuff. Right. And it was like, wow, what a pain. What a pain. Had you not ponied up millions of dollars, would these people have gone out of their way to do this? Highly doubt it. It was a great talking point and it really looked great. And it probably did some good things from a PR perspective for the chain. And I have mad respect for those guys. I mean, they're essentially the first ones to ever put a ZK EVM online, which I don't have time to get into why that's such a monumental thing. But zero knowledge proofs compatible with the Ethereum virtual machine is a major deal. So I love those guys. But from a real world application standpoint, it's too cumbersome. People aren't going to do it. So what do you need? You need speed, right? This 8 million TPS. I want to talk to you guys about that for a second. And none of us hate anything more than the 8 million TPS because it's just such a pain to like have people go 8 million. Wait, Solana does 50,000. How the hell did you get to 8 million? We're not even talking about 8 million transactions per second. We're talking about 8 million cross shard transactions per second. And what that means is if you've got 100 shards and each of those shards is doing, let's say 1,000, right? They could all do their 1,000 and we don't even need one cross shard transaction unless it needs to go from one shard to the other. We're talking 8 million cross shard transactions that we've clocked it at. That could be, I mean, if we have 1,000 shards deployed, let's say, right? And each of them is doing, I don't know how many, my math is not mathing today, but you might only need 1,000 cross shard transactions for all of those shards to do 8 million transactions, right? And we're talking about 8 million cross shard transactions. We can scale infinitely. That's it. We can scale infinitely with the way that we have built this, that honestly, Tom and his team built this chain, right? So the speed is solved. What's the next thing you need to solve? Up until this point, you've got Solidity, you've got Rust, and you've got Move, right? Those are your 3 programming languages that are prominent within crypto for the most part. And I think Go plays a role in there. But those are not, those are not your typical programming languages. And if we have any programmers on here, forgive me because I might butcher this, but C++, which is what we're coded in, that is a typical programming language, right? That is something that is used. Every programmer in the world probably knows how to code with C++.
Even Bitcoin is code on C++, I believe.
I don't know. Probably.
I think it is.
Maybe. But Bitcoin doesn't have smart contracts, right? And those are going to play a massive role in this. And I'm not going to get into it because I'm not educated enough to talk about it. But that's going to play a massive role in this. Every programmer in the world knows how to interact with an API. Like that is just the bottom line, right? Information in, information out. API, you've got calls, you put it in, boom, boom, boom. This was built 8 years ago and patented 8 years ago, knowing that the world would look like it looks today. While everyone else was saying, well, we're faster and cheaper than Ethereum, right? So all they were doing was trying to take one step up from what was currently on the market, which guess what happens when you go one step up? Well, somebody goes a step above you. And that has happened. Like there's so many layer ones on the market. Tom and Ray and, the rest of the guys were talking about, here's what we believe this is going to look like in the future. We don't believe the rest of the world is going to be willing to adapt to crypto. We believe that tokenization of assets is going to be a massive deal, right? We believe that secure value exchange with enterprise levels of liquidity. And when I say value exchange, I don't mean just Bitcoin to Ethereum. I mean stocks. I mean securities. I mean carbon credits. I mean, shit. I heard, I don't exactly know how this would work, but it was like you could legitimately pay a bill on Devve Exchange. I don't know how that would work exactly, but I've heard it said, so I'm repeating it. Don't quote me on it. this is bigger than anything I've learned about in crypto up until this point, right? Because I had a hump to get over when I first started working here. And that hump was, okay, you're a layer one. Cool. You're fast. That's great. Where's your lending platform? Where's your DEX? How do I play in this arena? Right. And then I started hearing, well, that's not quite how this works. We're focusing on enterprise. We deploy shards on an as needed basis for the enterprise that's going to be using them. Okay. Well, that was a hard hump to get over because to me, that was like, well, you're permissioned. That's not really the ethos of crypto. Like, that's not really the way that I've come to understand this. The open source nature of crypto is, the cypherpunk way of doing things, the down with the government and all that happy jazz. But the more I've come to learn about this, and I want to tell you guys, every time I shoot a video, that's me learning. Like, I'm learning about this topic as I'm sharing it with you guys at the same time. This is, I don't go into any of these topics knowing what the hell I'm talking about. I've got to learn about it in the process. But the more I've come to understand what we're driving at, and especially getting to know Ray and hearing Ray's vision from the beginning on what this was going to look like today, nobody listening to this, I don't believe, including myself, can accurately predict what this is going to look like in the future. That's how massive I believe this is. And some of the feedback from our partners, they're coming soon, have said that same thing, because these are not folks that, oh, look, it's Devve. Oh, nobody's ever pitched us on blockchain before. Everyone's pitched them on blockchain. Everyone. But we're the ones that got through the door. We're the only ones that got through the door. So anyhow, when this starts going, you guys, it bums me out that when we have these talks right now, that I have to be so cloak and dagger about it. And I cannot wait until that's over with. Because once it's over with, we're going to be having a whole new conversation, boys. There will be no talking about game. Yeah, we're not going to be digging into these credibility questions or like, how does this work or why is this important? We aren't going to be talking. That is not the conversation we'll be having any longer, boys and girls. Sorry, I'm not trying to be, sexist. Roger, do you want to jump into another question? I can't believe we're 40 minutes in and we've gotten to one.
Yeah,
question.
I know. Man,
I'm
there's
sorry.
so much to talk about. Well, I think you kind of answer most of them. I mean, some of them is asking if the exchange is available to the public, which is not. I mean, that's not out there yet.
Well, it's going to be.
Do we know the date? Obviously. Someone asked about the date, so I don't know if that's something.
So,
no, okay.
Listen, what you guys are asking about is the beta, and so this was a little, after that article came out, I was like, did we really want to write it in that way? But so, to my understanding, the beta is being created as an internal thing for our financial partners. It doesn't mean there won't be beta tester group. There may be, but I don't want everyone to expect that we're going to say, okay, here's the link, go sign up. That's not how this is going to work, right?
Now, another question, Oscar, is going to be, the exchange will be available in the U.S., correct?
That's a great question. So I want to tell you that I want to say yes, but I also want to tell you that, the licensing requirements, like in the US, they're also state by state. Like if they consider you to be a money transmitting business or anything like that, you have to get licensed in each of the 50 states. And it's a huge, huge deal. I don't honestly know the answer to that. The best answer I could give you is I know the team wants that. And
it might happen eventually, sooner or later. I mean,
I think, KYC will 100% be a part of this. Even though you're self-custodied, you will be KYC'd to use the exchange, 100%. I'm not positive if the self-custody factor actually gives us a little bit more of an in. I would have to ask Davin about that. Unfortunately, Davin's not in right now. But when he is, maybe on the next roundup I do with Davin, that'll be a question that I bring up. Because, and I want you guys to know something. Remember the August 1st date? And then that's when you saw the article. that date was not a release of Dev Exchange. It was us coming out of stealth. Out of stealth means telling you who our partners are and how all of this works, right? All of you will be satiated when we come out of stealth. When we come out of stealth, you guys will be a happy camper. That will, trust me, satiate your desire to know what's going on behind the scenes.
Someone's asking if you know, I mean, if you have a number of how many are on board already, how many of these partners are on board. I mean, you don't have to give the names. I guess they want to know the numbers.
Well, we're talking about the exchange right now, right? And there's only so many partners that are really needed. There's, I will tell you, there's 2 exchange partners that are world class. There are multiple countries that we're going to be working with. There's a lot of stuff going on in the back end. And there's a partner for S2. Yeah. So there, we will not be hurting for news throughout the Web3 space, but also news throughout the traditional world.
I have another question here, says if we understand perfectly now, Devve is trying to merge with Web2 businesses activities and Web3 systems together. Maybe you want to add some more to that?
I'd be happy to. Yes, that's right in my wheelhouse. Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, so that's everything we've been talking about up until this point, right? We've got tons and tons of enterprise, of countries, just everyday run-of-the-mill businesses who have seen benefit in blockchain, right? But and I would encourage everyone to go watch the intro to Devve video that I just put out. Like, it really breaks this down in a pretty simple way, but I'll just repeat it here. So tons of businesses have been, for lack of a better term, firewalled up against using blockchain, not because it's not a huge benefit, but because there's certain little non-negotiable aspects that they just can't get past. Whether it's you're a financial institution that you have to have privacy with auditability. Well, that doesn't work for Monero, doesn't work for Zcash, right? You've got to have the ability to lift the veil if a federal regulator comes in and needs to look. That's just the bottom line. That's just how it works. Or maybe there's, they love smart contract capabilities, but the smart contracts are written in a language that their current developers are not trained for. So they have a massive outlay. They've got to create a new department, new training, new people to maintain it. It just isn't working. So then, that's the option of using what's publicly available, which you really have no say over. So, okay, what's the next option? Let's create our own chain, right? The costs skyrocket at that point to create your own chain. The amount of time that it's going to take and the amount of money that it's going to cost largely are going to offset the benefit that you're going to receive. Not to mention, you're using legacy systems, right? Whatever systems you've got in place are going to be probably considered legacy. Really, no blockchain on the market for the most part is going to play nice with legacy systems, right? There's going to need to be changes that are made. Devve plays nice. We play nice out the gate right away. And a lot of that has to do with the REST API. So we're just built for that. We're literally built for that. Not for, go yeet your kid's college fund into a lending platform and make 10%, right? That's not what we're now we can open up a public shard and that may end up happening in the future. I'm not telling you guys that won't happen, but from the current infrastructure, there are so many systems throughout the world. And I've only been privy to the ones that have been shared with me because I'm not in the calls with the various countries, but there are so many systems throughout the world that are massive, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through them that have issues that can be solved so simply with Devve. It's literally a matter of showing it to them. That's it. And in most of these cases, what you got to understand is this. If you're selling a product, if you're selling me a loaf of bread, right? I am giving you money in exchange for something that I feel like has the same amount of value or more. In 99 out of 100 instances, when it comes to this type of technology, any financial outlay that is made for the tech is not immediately, but is met with a return plus, right? It's spending money to make money, which is the best way to spend money, in my opinion. And so, like, especially with the impact assets, that was one thing I really had to wrap my mind around. Say, okay, these large countries are doing this, and it's going to cost them this. But the things they're already doing, they're not monetizing. And we come in and we say, hey, don't change what you're doing. Just let us read the data. Boom. We're going to create these impact assets. Hey, Duncan's here. Good. Duncan, please come up here and help me not to sound like an idiot when I talk about ESG stuff. But to me, like, that computes, right? That computes. That we enable them to not only monetize, but at the same time, we streamline the process and we benefit the indigenous people of your country. What's not to love, right? All right. Anything else? Any other questions?
Let's see. Why is the team allowed to create more Devve when necessary? I don't know. Someone's asking.
Not. Okay. So what you're asking about is phase 2. We've got to qualify that. Okay. And me personally, I when I first came in, I was like, dude, guys, we've got to explain this phase 2 thing because this is a really tough thing for people to grip. There's 300 million Devve. That's it. Okay. Phase 2 is a theoretical thing that says if we're at the place where the economy needs to be stoked with some form of inflation, right? And Davin will explain it like this. Any Devve, and getting to phase 2 is a massive deal. Like we've got to be in a really way different position here for phase 2 to even be a talking point. But if it is, and it's a sort of thing where, governments need this or whatever, the impact assets are flying and these countries or companies need to lock it up, whatever the case is. Any Devve that would ever be put on the market would simply be, hey, there's Duncan. Hey, buddy, come on up. It would be only if every single one was a net benefit to the ecosystem. End of story. Bottom line. Duncan, did I bring you up, buddy? You're muted.
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
hey,
we
bud.
Can now.
Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. I know you were.
No worries at all.
So, on that note, now that we have Duncan here, Duncan, I want to ask you a quick question if we could. We were speaking earlier about the alignment of values, right? So you've got companies where it's, obviously they're focused on the bottom line, but they naturally either want to do good or let's even take it a step further. They just want people to think they're doing good, right? And we were talking on our AMA that we did the other day about how to, kind of make it more profitable to do good than it is to do bad. Can we touch a little bit on greenwashing and kind of how this problem has, existed within the space? I think you're probably more qualified than anyone else to chat about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think those two we can actually handle separately. Greenwashing, which I'll deal with first, which you mentioned latterly, is slightly different from the concept of potentially being more profitable to do good, either financially or from a reputational point of view from your customers, consumers, or users. But if we take the last item, greenwashing, I don't think is a new concept for most people listening. It is essentially the inflation of environmental impact that companies either directly or indirectly portray in the media or their own communications. So to put it simply, they're saying they're doing more good than they are. And that can be for a number of reasons. And some of those reasons are not actually intentional. Sometimes companies think they're doing good, but actually are being misled by a number of the players in the value chain. So to create what we now call a carbon credit, there's lots of different actors. There is the project manager, there's the landowner, there's the auditor, there's the verifier, there's the registry, and in certain cases, more latterly, there's the Web3 technology that sits on top. So sometimes greenwashing is accidental and sometimes it's intentional. But the bottom line is, as you said, most companies now, either because they want to or because they have to, they are required to be hitting net zero goals. And that's normally if you're talking about the voluntary carbon market, it's not actually mandatory. It's not. They're not in the compliance market. That they're not in the cap and trade. They're not one of the industries in the cap and trade. But because their users or consumers are demanding it, or because their supply chains have been identified as being inefficient, they want to hit net zero. And most companies and most big companies have got these targets. But the greenwashing element is them essentially saying we've planted 1 million trees, or we've removed 1 million tons of carbon. And they might generally think they have done, but the reality is they haven't. And that is one of the largest criticisms of the current voluntary market. And the reason for that is because it's very opaque, there's no unity in it, and there's no actual international standards. So if you then flip to the other part of the question, which is, can you actually do well by doing good? I think the answer for a lot of parties in the chain is that you can. Removing assets such as nature-based assets once leads to normally their permanent destruction, whereas certain areas can be sustainably farmed. They can be used for, or as we said, in a number of financial mechanisms in the carbon market, not just carbon credits. People have heard of carbon credits, but there's RECs, there's carbon offsets, and various other ITMOs and various other RRUs, for example, are quite popular, although their value has gone down considerably as well due to their own integrity problem. But generally speaking, there's an integrity crisis in the carbon market because fundamentally buyers don't trust what they're buying. And greenwashing has been part of that, double counting's been part of that, and just the sheer fact that there's no international standards and it's an unregulated industry has led to all of these issues. A prime example being tree planting. Lots of companies make huge, and incidentally, this also happens in Web3. They make huge claims around planting trees and all the carbon that's locked up. But actually, many of these trees, aren't protected and don't fulfill their 20-year lifespan because, as most people know, if you plant a tree, in reality, the actual carbon benefit of that could be a 20 to 30-year span. And that's what people forget. You don't plant a tree and suddenly you've locked up a ton of carbon. Yes, saplings do absorb a lot of carbon, but if you don't water them, they die. They are, for example, if you're doing a single tree crop, they are susceptible to disease. So, there are countless examples I came across in my early Web3 days where large-scale tree planting projects were just simply leading to greenwashing. One high-profile case was where a corporate planted 7 million trees, and then the project just didn't water them and they died. But they'd already made the environmental claim. So there is all sorts of items around the industry where you can do, you can do well, you can be more profitable by doing good, and that can be anything from creating impact assets, creating carbon credits. And there is a need in the market to remove, as I think people are now aware of, remove the element of double counting and greenwashing.
Thank you, Duncan. Man, when you speak, it's so much more intelligent than I can do. I appreciate you bringing that. So again, I was prefacing everything with, this is kind of what I've learned since I've been here. Question for you, Duncan, if I could. So I know that you and I have spoken on a number of times about the process to, I don't want to use the word mint, but to create these impact assets and how Devve does have the ability to really streamline that process. Can you speak on that? And maybe would you be able to touch on the real-time environmental data and why that's important?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the first thing I'll say is that a few years ago, environment and carbon markets were touted as one of the industries that blockchain in general could help. Obviously, when the ICO boom came out in 2017, everyone was scrambling around for use cases. You had shipping, you had medicine, you had voting, all of these industries that it could disrupt. And carbon markets were no different. However, what actually happened is you had a rush of people just tokenizing current carbon credits. And that just means that you were tokenizing something that's already been created, in many cases, either fraudulently or incorrectly, or just in a way that's just low quality. So what we're able to do now is link, well, to create the entire end-to-end life cycle of a carbon credit in a digitally native fashion and directly link those data sources to the credit in near real-time data. So for example, if you're taking data from Google Insights or from a satellite imagery or directly from a LiDAR scan or any GIS data or vegetation indices or any data source that you can API into and or automatically feed in the data, you suddenly got this coming into the platform in real time, so that in essence, any stakeholder at any time can track what actually the impact is, assuming that you've taken an accurate baseline, which again is one of the criticisms of the carbon market. And with this technology, you can, you take an accurate baseline, and then all of the data sources then are immutable. The provenance is there, and they're transparent, and should lead then to an increase in buyer confidence, which is really where the market has got to, is that buyers are not confident in carbon credits. Lee White, the Minister of the Environment of Gabon, said last year that he had 90 million tons of carbon credits in his pocket, burning a hole in his pockets, and no one wanted to buy them. So the supply actually has been there, but there's an integrity crisis, and there's a problem with trusting it. And by putting all of the entire life cycle and all of the aspects on chain immediately, you essentially alleviate that issue. And because of the scale and the technology that Devve now has, that is possible to overlay more advanced technology that currently exists in credits. For example, I was speaking to one of the projects that is helping the UN create audio sensing. So for example, you could for the first time not just have a satellite imagery, but you could actually track in pretty much accurate and real-time basis the actual biodiversity within the forest. And that includes everything from small animals to the apex predators. Things like that suddenly means you can unlock impact assets, carbon credits, biodiversity credits, and a range of other revenue streams from, and on top of that, ecotourism and all the others, from an area that potentially you would just cut down and get a one-time, or would potentially have historically been cut down for a one-time revenue boost.
Amazing. I guess we don't think of biodiversity, at least it didn't come to my mind, the biodiversity credits there for saving species. I was wondering, Duncan, so we were talking earlier, about the tweet that went out, which is, Ray's badge from the UN conference. And, I kind of have a little bit of a clue in a roundabout way. But the question was like, what's really going on there? Like, what is the interest the UN has in this environmental impact space and impact assets and, countries doing these particular things? Like, are you able to speak on that at all?
Well, I'll say right up, the UN has a massive interest because under Article 6.2 and 6.4 of the Paris Agreement, it's trying to create new ways that countries can effectively transfer these outcomes between each other. They're called ITMOs, which is, I guess, the next generation of carbon credits. But they're yet to agree an actual standard around that because of all the issues we've just discussed. There's lots of fragmentation, there's lots of registers and so on. So the UN itself has a massive interest in this because it wants to create the mechanism for the countries to ultimately unlock the financing, because the carbon market is essentially an attempt to reduce global emissions via a financial mechanism. And to do that, you need the elements to be in place that give the trust there. And the UN has a massive interest in getting these things funded because forested countries, of which about 50 or 60 have now signed up to the REDD+ program, want to do this, but they're not getting funded because either countries or corporations feel like they might misuse the funds. There's no safeguarding of local populations. And the UN has a massive interest, as does many nations, many nations. Primarily, the nations clearly where there are still large tracts of forested areas. As we've spoken about before, large parts of the world have already deforested their areas. And, take where I'm from as an example. Europe actually used to be, people don't realize this, but Europe used to be covered in forests. It was a the climate in Europe is actually perfect for forests. But they've been cut down. 96 to 97% of European forests have been cut down. So, and I think, it's not quite as drastic, but the US itself has also, cut down a number of their trees. So forested nations want to unlock this capital, and the UN would like to help them in that. So they have a massive interest, the countries have a massive interest, and the corporations alike also have an interest. So Ray is there, how shall I say this? Ray is there speaking to all parties that have an interest in making this work. And there is a huge interest. The US, for example, just came up with new or attempts to have new rules around the voluntary carbon market. Everyone's trying to bring these things in. So there's huge interest in doing it. Everyone knows the market is growing, and everyone knows there's a rather urgent need for it. I don't think we need to go into some of the headlines around, the weather incidents and so on. There is, a fast pace of warming of the world, and there is a need for it. And the UN has a huge interest in it. Most of the frameworks come from the UN, whether it was the original REDD+ program in Article 5 of the Paris Agreement. Most people have signed up either to the REDD+ program or one of the other related programs, such as the UNCCD, which is where you regenerate your degraded land. So all parties have an interest in it. And to date, the technology has not really been as advanced as Devve has. Clearly, I don't know if you've touched upon it, clearly other people in the blockchain space have talked about the carbon market. Way back in when I first started, you had the likes of Wax and Celo and other chains, most recently, Hedera. So the technology is now there, but there is huge interest from the UN, and it's in their own interest because this affects everyone. It's great to sit back and say, well, it's Brazil's problem or it's Gabon's problem or the Congo's, because they're the ones with the largest forest. Although actually Central Africa is now taken over from the Amazon as the largest carbon sink left in the world. Above land, I should mention, because below the water, there's also huge carbon sinks that are being disrupted. But on land, it's now Central Africa that is actually more important than the Amazon. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's really where we are at the moment.
Incredible. Duncan, thank you for your expertise, sir. Always appreciate having you on. I think we're probably pretty close to wrapping this up.
There were a few more questions from the chat. I don't know if you have time to answer them.
Yeah, fire away, buddy.
I think Patrick had a very interesting question. Says, what's the process with the tech company that everybody above 18 years of age knows? And is that the company considered as a partner or client? And I am talking about the exchange partners. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Patrick, actually, you are talking about the exchange partner, and that is a partner. And I can't really go any further than to say the scope, I believe, has actually increased. You guys will all be very pleased when we come out of stealth and y'all know what that is. But that's proceeding full speed ahead.
Perfect, Austin. There's one more thing I want to tell you guys is I will be participating next month at a crypto event in Latin America, in Honduras to be exact. It's called the Crypto Latin Fest. And I'm going to be a speaker talking about blockchain. And of course, I'll be using Devve as an example. And as you know, Latin America is huge in the environmental importance globally. Just Honduras alone has the second largest coral reef in the world. And then I believe after the Amazon, we have the largest rainforest as well. So, and then there's going to be about 300 speakers and sponsors that we're going to be inviting them to a welcome cocktail that we will be financed. And then, of course, we'll be talking to them about Devve. And besides the assistants and the speakers, they're expecting to have about 20,000 attendees. So this will be a very important way to bring Devve to Latin America. So I just want to add that. And then, Austin, if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, the only thing I actually wanted to say was I just put a playlist in the official group. So that is the intro to Devve video translated into 10 languages. So pick a language, share it with everyone you know. Hopefully that little 7-minute snippet gives you at least enough of an idea to move forward. And we are going to be working on ensuring that we're distilling down the message in a way that's digestible, because I do know that, you know, sometimes when we get into the weeds of all of this stuff, and hopefully, like when you heard Duncan speak, you can tell that the creation of these impact assets is very nuanced, right? There are many, many, many different activities that could create these. And so as a result, it's kind of, you know, for that particular area, you know, it definitely takes some information to convey that message. And so we want to do that in a way that's clear, concise, and, you know, that's going to be a big focus for us moving forward, because we want to make sure that when the lid does blow off of this thing, when the cake is done being baked, I'll say that for Mal. Mal likes that one. You know, it's at that point, a lot of eyes are going to be on us, and we want to make sure that we're accommodating them in a way that makes a lot of sense. So that's all I've got. Ladies and gents,
I just add one more thing, Austin.
Please, Duncan. Yeah.
Before you wrap up, the question about the partner in general, I just wanted to make a point around the conversations ongoing within Devve and partners are, as people know, very structured with Web 2 partners. And I think, as Tom said in one of his groups, it's a completely different ballgame when you are speaking to Web 2, either governments, agencies, or corporations, where the process to actually partner is very, very slow, normally requires multiple committees, and at any point in reality can fall over. You know, when I was at a high-profile investment bank, you know, we spoke to about implementing some software for 2 years, and then chose somebody else. So, and I'm not saying, incidentally, that this is a negative, but it's more about managing expectations around the speed of which things work. In Web3, tend to make a partnership within a couple of days, a week, and then you sign an MOU and everyone runs off and works out the details. Some of the things we're talking about are, you know, of the magnitude that requires very lengthy and complicated discussions that are ongoing and can take time. So it's really just to reiterate that. I know Tom has already mentioned this a few times, but just reiterate that to the community, that there are reasons we can't say anything at this point, and there are reasons it just takes longer than perhaps people are used to in Web3. And I've been around Web3 since about 2016, so I know the speed of which these partnerships are done sometimes, and a lot of them are, you know, they're meaningless in reality in Web3. They're just two founders sitting down as let's partner, but actually it's not really that beneficial to either party. So these are beneficial, but they are time consuming.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I get excited, and it's good to to have that perspective. Thank you, Duncan. I appreciate you, buddy. All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you guys for showing up. Next week, listen, again, next week I'm going to be out, so there's probably not going to be a roundup. The following week, we will start the roundups again. Going to be getting near the Halloween season. Maybe I'll wear a costume. I don't know. We'll find out. But thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it, Roger. Thank you for being the
Thank you, my friend. And just one more thing. Listen, guys, listen. You are early. This is the best opportunity of your lives. Patience is going to pay at the end. So stick with us. Stick with us. You are going to win. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.